Well, I'm sure that folks are going to continue to join us over the hour, and then we have people who will watch this later, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Katie Ruth. I am the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Environmental Education Noon program. Today we are learning and talking about stormwater and rain barrels. Very delighted and happy to have Megan Hopkins-Doer from Penn State Extension. She is the coordinator of both the Master Gardeners program of Chester County along with the Watershed Stewards of Chester and Delaware County. So she has her hands very full with all of those programs. So very delighted to have her here as our special guest today. Also want to introduce you to members of the team at PA IPL. We have Kristen, who will be helping me with today's program. She is our conservation fellow here and also works full-time with another watershed organization. So very glad to have her on this call and have her expertise with us here today. And then we also have Kathy, who is our development and project manager, and she'll be here in the background. So as you are here with us today, if you have questions or things happen, feel free to reach out to one of us as we get started. Today's program is funded by funding from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. They have environmental education programs. And so this program is put together under that, including the rain barrel distribution program, which some of you have signed up for, and we'll hopefully be getting a rain barrel here in the next couple of weeks. So with all of that, I am very glad to welcome you. If you're not familiar with our work, our website will be in the chat, and we welcome you to take a visit, learn a little bit more about who we are and what we're doing. But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you've watched these webinars, you know that it always takes a second to find everything and move stuff around. So as part of Penn State Extension, our mission is to share research unbiased information with everyone. And so because of that, we work in our communities to talk with people, to share information, as well as businesses, residents, everyone. The areas we cover a broad swath. I'm here as Master Watershed Steward Representative, and so that falls under agronomy and natural resources. But if you have questions about almost anything in your life, you can find answers with us. The Master Watershed Steward Program was formed to take people that were interested from the communities, give them education and training on the ground work to help and educate and empower them to protect our environmental resources. We work with partnerships and leverage those resources to increase watershed restoration and awareness efforts. These are all pictures of our watershed steward volunteers in Chester and Delaware County, and we help educate the community about water and natural resources, as well as support those boots on the ground type projects. It was launched in 2013 in Lehigh, Northampton County. And then since then, it has expanded to 42 counties. And I'm sure there's more coming in the next few years. And thank goodness for Erin Frederick, our statewide coordinator, for all that she does to make this grow. So we're here to talk today about watershed basics and rain barrels. We're going to split those two topics up. So first we'll deal with some watershed basics, and then the second part will be what rain barrels, which is exactly why you're here. As Katie mentioned, my name is Megan Hopkins-Doer. I'm the Master Watershed Steward Coordinator in Chester and Delaware counties, as well as the Master Gardener Coordinator here in Chester County. So this is a sample of a watershed diagram. We'll talk a little bit more about those different aspects and what that means. Pennsylvania has a crazy amount of water. There are 86,000 stream miles in our state alone. We're the have the second most stream miles in any state, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about the size of some other states and when you think of those water rich fellow states. Out of that, there's lots of wetland, acreage of impoundment, lake, pond access, and over 1 billion gallons of water are used every day, and that's drawn from groundwater for human consumption and use. Unfortunately, nearly 28,000 miles, about 1/3 of all those Pennsylvania waterways are considered impaired. And impaired just means that they're unable to support healthy aquatic life, or maybe unhealthy for recreation, fish consumption, or water use. And we'll go a little bit more how that goes back to that groundwater fact about how much water that we use is drawn from groundwater. And much of the rest of it is drawn from surface water, from our streams, creeks, streams, rivers, things like that. To start off, you want to think about back to elementary school when you learned about the water cycle. So water is constantly moving, and it's pushed through that movement by the sun. So your precipitation falls from the sky, whether in rain, hail, snow, sleet, any of that stuff hits the ground. Much of that will infiltrate or soak into the ground and then help to provide water for plants, soak deeper, infiltrate deeper for groundwater, shallow aquifers, things like that. Some of it will run across the land as stormwater, and we will definitely get back to those concepts in a little bit. As that water, after that water hits the ground, it will eventually make its way into a body of water. You then have evaporation. Evapotranspiration is where that water is leaving from plant life. And then the whole cycle just keeps repeating over and over and over again. Again, if you remember back to elementary days. But our human activities can impact the water cycle, and that can be from dams for hydroelectric power. It can be from what we do on our land, including the types of grazing agricultural livestock that we keep, from our development. All of those things can impact how the water cycle behaves in a certain area, which is important to keep in mind as we think about a certain area called a watershed. And we'll get to that in just a couple slides. Because as you know, when that water falls to the ground, it's not hitting flat ground where it literally just runs off or goes into the ground. It's hitting bumps and ridges and hills and mountains and all that stuff that makes our state and country so beautiful. So because of those different elevations, you have things called watersheds. And a watershed is just an area that drains water to a particular body of water. Watersheds are 3D. They are not just flat surfaces because they are defined by that continuous ridgeline, that highest elevation, so that if precipitation falls, you have your ridgeline here, precipitation falls. If it falls on this side of the ridgeline, it is in this watershed. If it falls on this side of the ridgeline, it is in this watershed. Watersheds are often part of larger watersheds. Generally, you end up with a basin. And so we'll have a slide to look at Pennsylvania's major watersheds, as well as I'll talk about the ones that I am personally in. Our watershed includes the groundwater, the aquifers, so water that you see above ground, that surface water, as well as water that you don't see in that area, because it is an area of land for a watershed. And that captures all the precipitation that falls within that boundary. Now, it's important to know because we all live in watershed. This is a map of Chester and Delaware County and the watersheds, as well as some of the watersheds that expand out to Lancaster County. I personally live just about there. Sorry, wrong area. Just about there in Chester, if you see my mouse, in Chester Creek watershed. That is what I normally say when I'm asked what watershed I live in. However, my sub-watershed, my lowest one, my smallest one, is Rocky Run Watershed. So Rocky Run Watershed is part of Chester Creek Watershed, which is part of Delaware River Watershed. So you can keep going up. Again, those boundaries are made by the land. So a sub-watershed is part of a watershed, it's part of a larger watershed. And we all, again, live in a watershed. So these are the major watersheds in Pennsylvania. You can see those three largest ones are the Ohio, the Susquehanna, and the Delaware. And I imagine most people on this call are either in the Susquehanna or Delaware. Sometimes these are also called basins and drainage areas. There are lots of terms that float around for the same thing. Now, watersheds are complex things. There's lots of different components that can factor how they behave and that impact them. This is a pretty simplistic connection chart. So all the outer ring are things that can affect that watershed, that river basin, but that doesn't show all the interconnections between nutrient inputs and processing and riparian buffer vegetation. So if you then think of this and think of all additional lines and connections between them, you can start to see it more as a web of interconnected things, just like our ecology webs, our food webs, all those things, because nothing is life is static and alone and isolated. I should say, nothing that I can think of, because somebody might be able to come up with an example that I'm not thinking of. Now, there's lots that we do, again, that impact the stream of the health of our streams. So these are two examples. You have an unhealthy stream and a healthier stream. Without knowing a little bit more and doing monitoring things like that, this is just a sampling of what could be going on. So for your healthy stream, you see that shading to provide coverage. You see natural debris that's falling in there that supports those macroinvertebrates, those smaller insect larvae that live down there, that feed the fish, that feed the things that eat the fish, that feed everything and help keep that ecosystem running. But then on your unhealthy stream side, you don't have that coverage. You have extra nitrogen and phosphorus going into there, which can cause algal blooms. That sediment runoff that can cover up those areas that those macroinvertebrates live, thus taking out a key point of that stream food web, and unfortunately having cascading effect where it negatively impacts everything around that. And in this image, we're not even including the water that we need to draw for our human consumption. So with that, as I said, it is kind of quicker in the beginning, so we will stop this for a second.
All right, so what we wanted to do for folks today is to take a moment to put everybody into smaller breakout rooms for a little bit of discussion based on some of the things that you just heard about. Maybe you're new to watersheds, so this is the first time, or maybe you know all about watersheds and you're here because you're passionate about this issue. Either way, both of those people and everybody in between is very much welcome to this space. So we're going to take 5 minutes in small breakout rooms. Kathy's going to help us get those situated now. And what we're going to do in that time together is to share in small groups with each other. Who are you? So take a moment to introduce yourselves to the people that you find in your room. Where are you joining us from? I have a feeling a lot of folks on this call are from Southeast Pennsylvania, but I see a couple names around from other places as well. And then what is your water story? Is there a particular place in nature that is particularly significant to you where water has been part of it? Do you have a fun story around water from your childhood, or maybe a favorite place you like to go and take your dog or your children, or even just yourself? So the prompts are general, and hopefully invite everybody to a short time of discussion around the ways that our lives interact with water. if you're not automatically bumping into your room, you should be able to opt to join in now. It's right now, so as you all jump back in, if you could take a moment, it's really helpful for us to know how we're reaching people and interacting with you. We had 650 requests come in for rain barrels from folks in southeastern Pennsylvania, which is incredible. We're really excited about it. We don't have the capacity to fill that many with this particular round of funding, but we are hopeful to look for further pathways for funding so that hopefully we can eventually fulfill each of those 650 requests. But it's great to see where people are joining us from today. All right, well.
Katie, this is Bill. I'll just mention for people who actually live in the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Water Department has had a rain barrel program. They're trying to minimize stormwater going into the combined storm and sanitary drains. So if you live in Philly, you should also put a request out to the Philadelphia Water Department to see if they're still offering rain barrels for people. Just a tip.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Bill. All right. Hopefully you all enjoyed your conversation. I am going to turn things back over to Megan to tell us a little bit more about rain barrels.
So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Because now we can talk about rain barrels, which is why you are all here. So a rain barrel is simply a container to collect rain for later use in your landscape. It is a method of water conservation because although we talked about Pennsylvania being rich in water, that water, if you're on municipal water, is treated, which uses energy and pumped out to your house. If you're on well water, then you are drawing from groundwater. So although we're rich in water, the past 3 weeks aside, we do want to conserve it. It's also a way of reducing the impacts from stormwater runoff, which we will talk about right now. So stormwater runoff, again, when that precipitation hits the ground, it can soak into that ground, infiltrate into the ground, or it can run off. I already mentioned that those are natural processes, but we have increased the amount of stormwater runoff exponentially primarily because of development. So it is one of the biggest pathways for pollutants entering our local waterways. And most of that is directly because of impervious surfaces. And that is area that the water can't soak through, whether it is pavement, your rooftop, a shed, any of the above, generally development. And some of the biggest areas in Chester County are actually due to pavement for parking lots. So the historic approach to stormwater management was just to get it off site as quickly as possible. So the rain falls, you don't want to see those ponds, you don't want to see anything else, you want to get that stormwater off. So we had downspouts leading to streets, things like that, getting water to those storm drains. Unfortunately, that storm drain is not connected to a water treatment plant. And so it leads directly to our creeks. As that stormwater passes over the ground, it picks up all sorts of pollutants, whether that is excess fertilizer, things from the development materials that it hits, pavement, car oil, litter, different chemicals, waste from our pets, things like that. So it can be a really big problem hitting our streams directly, because again, I cannot stress enough that water is not treated. Once it goes to a storm drain, it goes to our creeks. There are lots of implications for stormwater impacts, and we're going to go through these right now. So flooding is often considered one of the top priorities because it's one of the easiest to see. So whether you've dealt with flooding yourself or have friends, neighbors who deal with it in their yards, in their homes, things like that, it's an easy problem to see as a big concern. That flooding, because again, that stormwater volume has just increased drastically. And so our creeks can no longer handle the volume of water that we are putting into them, which causes them to back up the storm drains, things like that, cause overflow and flood our areas. Pollution is another big problem. And honestly, I would say that this is the biggest one, but again, flooding is just kind of in your face. So as that stormwater runs across land, repeating again, it picks up the things that are on the land. So that can be soils, that can be excess nutrients, things like that. Those excess nutrients can cause algal blooms farther downstream. So there's a whole, it's not just what happens locally, but it is what happens downstream in communities as well. I do want to mention that, again, that animal, our pet waste, because it is often questioned why pet waste is different from wildlife waste, because there are deer, there are rabbits, there are fox, there are all sorts of things that live in as wildlife in our environments that have bodily functions. They are not eating the same materials, the same things with preservatives, things like that, that our pets are. And so there's a difference in the defecation that comes from them and what kinds of bacteria growth and things like that can be in our pet waste that can be picked up with stormwater and deposited into our streams. And again, our streams are providing our water as well. So it creates a health issue beyond just those milk brown streams that creates a ecological hazard. So when that water hits that large volume, it can cause, or it does cause streambank erosion. That is picking up sediment, taking it downstream where it does not belong. And so that is also clogging up those areas where those macroinvertebrates live, disturbing that ecosystem that should be in that stream, making it potentially unsafe for us for recreational purposes, as well as fishing and other needs. So lots of damage that can happen as that storm is worn away. Not only that, a lot of our municipal services are placed near streams. So as that land erodes, you can't fall into the danger of having those things exposed, those pipes, things like that, exposed and not supported, as well as if you ever seen scouring under streets. Different infrastructure problems are caused. So, if you think about the cost of infrastructure, we are causing all sorts of problems for ourselves, not just where we live, but in how we live. Again, talking about that sedimentation. So with that scouring, with that sedimentation deposit, if you see down on this picture, it looks kind of like a beach where you have those like riffles of sediment that is there. That's clogging up the areas where those macroinvertebrates live. Our mayflies, our caddisflies, things like that need riffles. So they need stony areas with some calmer water, leaf litter, as well as some flowing water to keep up those oxygen levels. So in an area like this, you may see some of those macroinvertebrates, but you're not going to see the diversity that you need for a healthy ecosystem. Because unfortunately, their habitat is so degraded that they can't find the food and habitat that they need to thrive. Now, we did talk a little bit about groundwater recharge. This diagram is a great example of what the problem is. As we develop more and more, we are preventing that water from being able to infiltrate into that ground. So if you look at the natural ground cover diagram, it's showing 40% evapotranspiration. So that's water that's going back into our atmosphere from plants, leaves, things like that. 10% as runoff, 25% in that shallow infiltration that also helps with watering plants, things like that. And then 25% into that deep infiltration. And again, water is constantly moving. But then as you build things up, if you look on the left-hand side, this is 75% impervious, which different areas of our state have greater and higher percentages of impervious. You maybe have 30% evapotranspiration, depending on street trees, lawns, and we'll talk about that in a second, and other things. But you only have 10% shallow infiltration and 5% deep infiltration, which means we're really setting ourselves up for lack of groundwater, lack of fresh water for our future generations, because it takes a really long time for groundwater recharge. So if we're preventing much of that from getting into the ground, we're really harming ourselves and future populations. And then at 55% stormwater runoff, we already kind of dealt a little bit with just a highlight of some of the issues that stormwater runoff causes. Because infiltration is key. When that precipitation falls to the ground, we want it to get into the ground. Pavement, nothing's getting in. It is fully impervious. Our lawns, unfortunately, are only slightly better, and that's because they have very shallow root systems that are intertwined and form almost a matting-like system. They also get, the soil gets compacted as we mow it. Take other care aside, if you provide fertilizer and herbicide and things like that for a perfectly manicured lawn, not much water is getting into the ground, even if you have what seems to be a lush green lawn. Your best bets are native plants. Forests do a great job. Native meadows do a great job. And part of that is because our native plants, most of them have really deep root systems that break up the soil and make it nice and loose. Their leaf litter at the natural decomposition helps break up and add soil biology and things like that to our soils, which help with carbon sequestration, again, breaking up the soils, all sorts of great things. And soil science is an amazing topic if you ever want to look into it. So what we can do are called homeowner best management practices. And homeowner is just kind of general use of the term for any residence, because no matter if you are a renter, a homeowner, a business, you can do those BMPs where you live. So the main goals are to reduce pollution, improve infiltration, and conserve water. So there's a lot of different BMPs that you can look at, and I highly recommend looking at Stormwater Homeowner Guide to Stormwater Management. There is a link on Extension's website. You can do things in a certain area and see the effect on the amount of stormwater that that area would create, and then put in BMPs to see how that would change that. I highly recommend it. I will try and put the link into our chat once I'm done talking. Right now, we are here to talk about rain barrels, which is a great BMP and something that's a little easier for many people to do. So we do want to conserve water resources, because although Pennsylvania has lots of water, there are the average American household uses about 320 gallons of water a day, and more than half of that is used for outdoor watering our outdoor lawns and gardens. That means we're using potable or drinkable water to water our outdoor space. Whereas if we take rainwater, it is great for those spaces. Again, so because a rain barrel can save you about 1,400 gallons of water between April and October. And that's assuming that it rains and then you drain it in between storm events. In terms of how much water you can save, there is an equation based on the roof size. So that equation is looking at the inches per rain event. So a 1-inch storm event, 2-inch storm event, things like that. The square foot of that rooftop area, and then a conversion factor. And that lets you know how many gallons of rain you can collect in your rain barrel and prevent from being stormwater in a single event. Sometimes it's a little easier to see some like an actual example. So this image is a roof of about 800 square feet, so 40 by 20 square feet. In a 1-inch rainfall event, that homeowner can save 500 gallons of water from being stormwater runoff. It is crazy the amount of stormwater that is created just from a single home. So if all 600 something people that applied for rain barrels from Katie get rain barrels and again use them in between each rain event, that's an amazing amount of stormwater that we can prevent because we are keeping that water on site and helping it infiltrate into the ground. There's also benefits to the homeowner. So if you're on a municipal stormwater system, you could decrease your water bill because you're using less water because you are using rainwater to water your outdoor plants. It's also better for plants because a lot of our municipal water is treated with chlorine, which is great for us, not necessarily great for plants. And then you're protecting your valuable landscaping during times of drought and low rain. So for those that had rain barrels already, these past 3 weeks were that water was invaluable because otherwise you're using water from your hose that is potable water. And again, gone through a drinking treatment facility to remove all those contaminants to make it usable for us to drink. The rain barrel can be used in lots of ways. So we talked about landscaping. You can use it in your gardens, your trees, your koi ponds. If you test your water first, you just want to be careful about that. Cleaning tools, waters, cleaning windows, washing your dog, washing your car, all of those things, bird baths are great use for your rain barrel water. But just as a precaution, you never want to use it for cooking or drinking because that water can contain different bacteria and things that grow from the leaf litter, from bird poop, from other things, from your roof material. So you never want to use it for drinking or cooking. You also we don't normally recommend using it for if you grow your own plants, so edible plants. And that's because there can be all those things that we just mentioned. If you are using it for vegetables, it's best to get it tested and definitely water at the soil underneath your vegetables, and do not collect it do not water things if you have any of the following below. So old tar and gravel, asbestos shingle roots, treated wood, copper or zinc anti-moss strips. You want to pay attention to the gutter that you have because some are coated in lead-based paints, and don't collect rainwater if you have a moss killer on your gutter and roof. Rain barrel design. So I'm also looking at time and quickly running out. This is a standard rain barrel design where you have that input from your downspout. You have some kind of screen mesh to block insects and things like that from going in. You have an overflow at the top and then a way to get the water out down below. It's really important how you choose your spot. So look for some place where you can use that water in between each rain event. So close to your plants, things like that. You don't want your rain barrel to be more than 3 feet away from that downspout. For setting it up, you want to choose an area that is pretty level. So use sand or gravel to make that, raise it up with cinder blocks, bricks, things like that. That'll help with gravity increasing pressure for water flow out when you empty out that rain barrel for use in your landscape. For additional considerations, think about where you're putting it. So make sure that it's close to a downspout. This one, they're just using their porch and just using this, and they have it falling because it is a very small area. We do recommend having it closer because it is definitely going to splash here, but it is lovely. So you can see that they took aesthetics into consideration and what they wanted for their site. Ooh, sorry. Now that you're ready to install your barrel, put your barrel on that elevated area and then measure it. So put a level across the top, put a mark in the center of your downspout for where that hole is going to be. And there are different ways to connect it to a downspout. So if you look at this one, it is a hole made with a hole saw drill. And there are kits available online for downspout connectors. Once you have that, this is a different way where you bisect that downspout. So again, marking it where you're going to connect it. This is where you cut it in half and use a diverter. A diverter will be used either way, so I should mention that. If you want to have more water collected, you can connect different rain barrels together to increase the amount of water that you can collect. And if you look, they have a nice little system set up with pavers and stones and things like that for their rain barrels. You do want to make sure that there's a cover because you don't want mosquitoes and other things getting in there to breed. Keep it, and it'll help to keep out some of your leaf litter, and do clean off that leaf litter periodically because you want that going in if you're just feeding from an overhead system instead of directly with a diverter. Maintenance, make sure you use that water because otherwise when the next rain event comes, nothing is getting in there. The importance is to use the water that you're collecting. You want to disconnect it in the winter because there can be problems from freezing with expansion, contraction, all of that. It is best if you clean it out annually. And so just making sure your regular maintenance, looking for leaks, obstructions, if there's any problems with your downspout, all of those things. And if you have some of those issues, I can say that the watershed stewards in various counties across Pennsylvania are here to try and help with some of those answers. Maintenance in winter is really important. Do not forget to disconnect it from your downspout and let it drain completely. Now that you have a downspout, you may want to think about applying for the Watershed Friendly Certification Program, which is from Penn State Extension, from the Master Watershed Stewards, and goes through different behaviors and actions that you could take where you live. And it includes renters and people in Philadelphia. So William, hopefully you will think about this if you haven't already. And that is my information. I will add the link to the Master Watershed Stewards into the chat. And again, try and go back to that homeowner's guide. And then we have lots of information online if anybody has questions or things like that.
Thank you, Megan. I am going to invite Kristen to join us. That was really informative and helpful, even as someone who has been talking about and using rain barrels for a while. It was really good. So thank you for being here and sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely. Thanks.
So We now have a short time for some Q&A, so I've invited Kristen, who's our conservation fellow, to help field some of those questions. I did see one question come up in the chat already, Kristen, that I'm going to turn it over to you two for a conversation. Since we're a small enough group, we can probably utilize the raise hand function and people can unmute and ask their question too. If it's too difficult to spend all the time typing it directly into the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Megan, for that great presentation. I'm actually a Master Watershed Steward in training, so I highly recommend that program too, if you're interested in getting more involved with all things watersheds. So I did catch that first question in the chat, so I guess I'll just kick us off with that one. So it starts with what's being done about sewer overflow, since it's not just pet waste, but also food waste in some places, among other things.
So food waste, if you can compost on site, that is wonderful. It's not possible for everyone. Some boroughs, some municipalities have a food waste collection program. And so definitely look into what you can do, whether it is through your municipality, what you can do at home as a resident, or potentially what you can do with neighbors. I could say the CSA that I belong to collects food and yard waste, and they compost it on site. So there are times when I have too much, and I'll just take it over to them. So look at your options in your neighborhood.
To expand on that question just a little bit more, I know pharmaceuticals are another big thing that people aren't sure what to do with their waste there. So something I'm aware of is take back days where township buildings or related places, municipal areas will sometimes take those things back. So I'm wondering, Megan, if you have anything else to add there.
There's so much that you should not put. The only things that should go down the drain are water and toilet paper. Everything else is not meant to be flushed. Please ignore what it says. All that unflushable nonsense is just that. It is nonsense. That's where you have those fatbergs. If you ever want a disgusting image, look up what some of that is. They create all sorts of problems. As Kristen mentioned, there are emerging contaminants that our treatment facilities are not able to deal with. So never put medication down the drain. If you cannot turn it in and some CVSs and drugstores will have a take back program, as well as municipalities. Police offices often do, health departments, things like that. Worst case, put it into the landfill. That's not a great option either, but it is much better than down the drain.
Okay, great. Thank you for expanding on all the things that end up in our water. So the next question goes right back to water barrels. So the question is, most water barrels I've seen have the drain at least 4 to 6 inches above the bottom. So it is not possible to drain the whole barrel. So I guess whatever's left in that bottom portion. Why is that?
Part of it is so you have to. It has to do with gravity and being able to get that water out and connecting the faucet enough. So it is unfortunate if you can dump your rain barrel upside down when you're disconnecting in the winter, that is best. If it has a little space to expand and contract, you should be okay, but you want to clean out anyway. And so I do recommend dumping it, flipping it over, because you don't want to collect water accidentally over the winter, even if you disconnect it from your downspout.
Okay, great. So I don't see too many other questions in the chat. So I'll give you all a few more minutes maybe to think on that and add any if you have them. But I do have one last one. And Katie, I'm not sure how much time you want to spend, since I know we're at 12:50 already. We're good for a couple more maybe? Okay, cool. So the question I have is, what is the biggest challenge in maintaining a rain barrel? I know you covered some of the maintenance that has to be done, and honestly, like annual maintenance, that sounds pretty good, since a lot of other water-related maintenance is much more often than that. So I'm wondering if you have any like anecdotal advice or things that you can speak to there.
What we've heard time and time again, that people have the biggest problem with is installation. There are some resources that will be in a follow-up that I will share. There's lots of videos online for installation. It's really not hard. And if you're looking for the whole, check with neighbors. If you belong to a Buy Nothing group on Facebook or something like that, ask if they have a hole saw drill. Ask if somebody will come and help you out with that. I could say that at least for my Buy Nothing group, there's all sorts of things that we've shared that people have borrowed with each other. So it's nice, and you get to meet a neighbor that you might not have known otherwise. Installation is more, I think, in our heads than the actual, because it seems really concerning to cut through your downspout. But there's lots of guidance out there.
Okay, great. It's great to hear that. Oh, I see a hand. So Betsy, you can unmute and ask your question if you'd like.
Yeah. Yes. I was wondering how you avoided mosquitoes.
Sure. And so that's that mesh, and that keeps out, it's small enough wire to keep out mosquitoes. So if you have the water flowing from a downspout above, so things could get in, you definitely want to have that protective barrier. If you have that diverter that goes directly in, it's going from your gutters into your rain barrel directly and not exposed so much to air where other things can get in. That helps to prevent a lot of it. You also don't want your water sitting there. So mosquitoes generally take it. Rule of thumb is, I think, 72 hours to start before they can breed. So making sure to use your water pretty soon after a rain event also helps a lot. But adult mosquitoes shouldn't be getting into your rain barrel. They should be excluded.
All right, I see Jenna's hand up, so you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, so I just had a question about the winter time when you are detaching. If you have cut your downspout, like, is that just then whatever rain that you get, just, I mean, is that okay to just keep it? And obviously then it more splashes in your driveway or yard or whatever. There's nothing to be done about that, I guess.
So if you do that, they have temporary ones that you can attach, and so put those on. If you notice, the one picture had almost like a sprinkler system out of the downspout. So you can look at other things that you could temporarily attach for a little bit. You do want to make sure that that water that hits that goes down your downspout is going to vegetation and not to the streams. So a downspout diverter or extender is another homeowner BMP. Yes, it is a little concerning. If you ever want to put like a bucket out there and dump that's an option. At this point, we're recommending more the diverter system, because then it's a hole that you can plug up with. It comes with a cap for that, and a couple other reasons with the debris and other stuff that can get inside.
Okay, great. Thanks for all the great answers, Megan. I'm going to defer to Katie since we have about 5 minutes left. Do you think it might be time to transition here?
Yeah, I did also see 2 more questions in the chat from Elizabeth and Helga. I'm wondering, Megan, if you would be amenable to sharing a response to those, and we can send it in a follow-up email for everybody, if that's okay.
So I can see Helga's question. We don't know of a program that's tracking rain barrels across the state. We are tracking people that applied to the watershed friendly certification, but that's certainly not the number of people that have rain barrels that are doing BMPs. And I'm not aware of a program that is tracking that.
Yeah, I am also not aware of a program. I think it would be very valuable, though. We're certainly hoping to track where we're helping rain barrels get. So that data will hopefully be available, at least within our network, to show some of the impact of our particular work. Well, thank you all for joining us. I know we have just a couple of minutes here. Not everyone who is on this call is receiving a rain barrel, so I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time to kind of go over any of those details. But the long and the short of it is you will hear from me and from the team sometime next week confirming pickup locations for rain barrels. We will have a site in Lancaster County and a site in Montgomery County. We're just working to finalize those details. If you were tapped that you made the list of 50 that are getting rain barrels this time round, and you have not completed the fulfillment request form, please do that today. Otherwise, it will open up a second round to the next people in the list. We're looking to fill those 50 spots by the end of today. So please make sure that you fill that form out if you're on that original list and have not done it yet. If not, look for an email because you might be on the next set that is able to get it this time around. Like I already mentioned, if you're not able to get it this time, we did send out that form that is letting us know that you want to be put on our waiting list for the future. We will use that list to approach some funders to hopefully look for some pathways to getting those rain barrels situated and hopefully in your gardens not too long from now. In addition to that, I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about the work of PA IPL. So we work across a number of different issues, including conservation work, which is what this program is kind of focused on today. But one of the other major campaigns we are running right now is we are collecting public comment to the Environmental Protection Agency. They are currently reviewing their standards for carbon pollution that comes from power plants. And so we want to see those be as strong as possible to keep our communities healthy, our water safe, and our air healthy. So please, the link will be in the chat. Please take a moment if that is something that you're interested in participating in to send a comment. We are collecting them and then we will make sure that they all get over to the EPA office by the time the comment collection period closes. So the link for that will be in the chat. I'll also share briefly in the chat a link, and all this will be in the follow-up email too if you're not able to jump on it right now. If you're not already on our newsletter, that's the best way to stay in touch with us and learn more about our work and the areas that we're working on. And this program is funded by Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, but as you can see, our reach and impact is building quickly and more than we're able to support. So if you're able to contribute to support our programs, the link is also in the chat, and very grateful to those of you who made a small donation as you were signing up for today's program also. And the final thing I'll mention is that if you're more interested in learning more about our policy and advocacy work, we do actually host a monthly call similar to this one that is focused on policy and advocacy work. And that link will also be available in the chat and the follow-up email. Beyond that, I wanted to share a quote as we close. This is from Vandava Shiva. She is an Indian ecofeminist scholar and activist who's been doing a lot of work around water for a very long time. And she shares, although 2/3 of our planet is water, we face an acute water shortage. The water crisis is the most pervasive, most severe, and most invisible dimension of the ecological devastation of the earth. As we work to conserve our waterways, to protect the health of our communities, I think it's important to realize that we're participating in solving a bigger problem, that we're helping make our world a better place, a safer place, a place that survives for the future generations. And so the more that we're able to take these small steps together, whether that's putting in a rain barrel, helping to plant a beautiful meadow, plant native trees, or advocate with our elected officials for the issues that matter to us, we are participating in helping to move towards the healing of our planet in a way that benefits all of us. So thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. I am very glad to see each of you, and for those of you who will watch this recording too later. Thanks, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.